And I see we are live now on YouTube, so I'll welcome everybody officially to our special town council meeting for April 19th, 2021. This is a meeting tonight to basically look at our official plan review and entertain some public commentary. So with that, I will open the meeting and call it officially to order and move right on to item 2 on the agenda tonight, and that's the approval of the agenda. Recommendation reads that the agenda for the special council meeting of April 19th, 2021 be approved as presented. Could I ask for a mover, please? Moved by Councillor McConnell, seconded by Councillor Burton. Thank you both very much. Any comments on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations tonight from members of council? Seeing none, and so we'll move right on to item 4, presentations. And under 4.1, we do have our main presentation tonight, and the primary reason we're together this evening. And that's 4.1, our official plan review. I'd like to welcome our friends from WSP tonight. We have Anita Sott and also trying to find her on the screen again, Nadia DeSante. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And Mr. Armstrong, did you have any preamble from staff's perspective before I turn it over to our WSP presenters tonight for their look at the presentation itself?
Certainly. So this is a culmination of several months worth of work. We have previously been to council to discuss the growth management projections, as well as going through the process of visioning and public feedback. And tonight that brings us to the point where we're now able to make some recommendations to council and move those forward. So certainly we're very happy to welcome our friends at WSP and who's our consultants for planning services. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to them.
Great, thank you very much. And over to Ms. DeSante and Ms. Sott for the presentation. I see you're sharing the screen there. So I'll ask everyone to try and hold the questions until we're finished with this presentation overall. Just take notes and we'll ask the questions at the end so we can get through this in a relatively expeditious manner. So Ms. DeSante, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Todd, members of council, town staff, and members of public. My name is Nadia DeSante. I'm the project manager for this official plan review, and I am joined by my colleague Anita Sott, who is a senior planner with WSP, and we are based out of Ottawa. We have been working with the town since mid-2019 on the comprehensive official plan review. So tonight's meeting is a special meeting of council under Section 26 of the Planning Act. Our presentation will address a number of items, including the purpose of the meeting as part of the official plan review process, an overview of the project process and consultation undertaken to date, key information from the background report prepared for the project, a review of provincial requirements and comments obtained from the ministries thus far, and an overview of 3 discussion papers which have been prepared, including a series of recommendations for key updates required to the town's official plan. The official plan review project will result in a new official plan which will guide growth and development in the town over the next 20 years, and which would be in effect for the next 10 years until council undertakes another official plan review process. Tonight's meeting is a special meeting of council required under Section 26 sub 3 of the Planning Act, the purpose of which is to consider revisions that may be required to the town's official plan. We will be presenting a series of recommendations for potential updates to the town's existing official plan, which was last amended in 2018. These recommendations are documented in the background report for the project prepared in July 2020 and in a series of 3 discussion papers on key land use policy topics prepared earlier this year. These documents are all available for review on the town's official plan review website at the link on the slide. We would like to note that the recommendations presented here tonight do not necessarily reflect the exhaustive list of updates that may be made in the official plan, but they are key recommendations for changes which have been informed by consultation with the town staff, provincial ministries, and members of the public to date. Following our presentation, there is also an opportunity during this meeting for members of the public to make delegations with their comments regarding the official plan review, and these comments and other community input throughout the project that will help to inform the development of official plan policies. The current official plan review process being followed is illustrated on the slide with the key phases shown in red on the right, with key deliverables and key community engagement activities shown in blue. We last presented to Council on January 6th, 2020 to introduce the official plan review work plan. Just to digress, that was one of our last meetings in person at the town. So it's amazing how we are here in April 2021, a year and a couple months later. So we keep plugging away. Also, at that January 2020 meeting, we presented our public consultation plan and the results of the growth management analysis completed by Hempson Consulting, who is a sub-consultant to the project. The official plan review process was temporarily put on hold for a portion of 2020 due to COVID, and pending the province's release of the new provincial policy statement 2020, which came into effect last May. So there was a bit of a pause, but we are fully on our way. The official plan review process was restarted in summer 2020. In July 2020, WSP and town staff attended a pre-consultation meeting with the Ontario ministries and received comments and direction regarding the current official plan and policy updates which should be considered. In October and November 2020, we held a series of community visioning activities, including a video presentation on the town's website to introduce the official plan review and key policy topics that will be addressed. We also held an online community survey on these topics and received 159 public responses. A separate survey was also provided to key economic development stakeholders in the town, including organizations such as the Prescott BIA, the Chamber of Commerce, Grenville Community Futures Development Corporation, representatives from neighboring municipalities and the United Counties, and local business owners. The survey received 18 responses, and a follow-up virtual meeting was held on November 10th, 2020 to hear additional feedback. As part of these activities, we asked respondents how they envision Prescott 20 years in the future, and some of their responses are illustrated in the word cloud on the screen, including words like growing, vibrant, prosperous, and historical. This input will be used to consider potential changes to the vision statement for the town currently included in the existing official plan. We have also reached out to 6 Indigenous communities who may have interests in town lands. Phone calls and emails were placed to introduce the communities to the official plan review project, provide a link to the background work completed to date, and to share the notice of tonight's special meeting. No responses from these communities have been received as of yet, but we'll continue to reach out to them as we move forward through this process. As mentioned, we completed a background report in July 2020, which includes a community profile, an overview of the regulatory planning framework which applies to the town, including the Planning Act and the 2020 Provincial Policy Statement, as well as an overview of the town's existing official plan and other municipal plans and documents which contain policies or direction that are relevant to the official plan. The report also contains a summary of Hempson's growth management and vacant land supply analysis. Finally, the report includes a review of the town's existing official plan policies for consistency with the 2020 PPS and identifies where policy revisions may be required. Hempson's growth management analysis was completed in February 2020 and looked at a 20-year planning horizon to the year 2039. The report concluded that there is an estimated potential for growth in the town by 1,200 so 1,200 housing units and 900 jobs to the year 2039, and that the town has a sufficient amount of vacant land supply which is currently designated for residential and employment uses to accommodate the forecasted growth. With respect to recommendations for updates to the official plan to be consistent with the 2020 PPS, so PPS is the acronym for the Provincial Policy Statement, key provincial policies that need to be reflected in the new official plan include policies that encourage the provision of diverse housing options, such as multi-unit housing, additional residential units, affordable housing, and housing for older persons. We also need to include policies that address the impacts of a changing climate, such as changing water levels. The requirement for municipalities to engage and coordinate with Indigenous communities on land use planning matters also needs to be addressed in the official plan. And in addition, policies must promote coordination with adjacent municipalities on planning matters, such as the co-location of infrastructure to service mutual needs. To this end, we are aware that Prescott is partnering with the Township of Augusta on a land development and needs analysis and economic development strategy. A key area of the town where coordination with neighboring municipalities should be considered is north of Highway 401, and any development that is located along or spans the municipal borders. From the ministry pre-consultation meeting that we had, which was a virtual meeting, key comments received from the provincial ministries included the need to consider adding a section to the official plan to address human-made hazards and required consultation with the province for proposed development within 1 kilometer of known abandoned mine sites in neighboring municipalities. The official plan policy updates are also required to address Prescott's natural heritage system, including any provincially significant natural heritage features and areas that may have been identified since the town's last official plan review, such as woodlands or wetlands, as well as the identification of potential wildfire hazard areas that the province has mapped. Another key policy topic of interest to the Ministry of Transportation is goods movement, and especially policies around development and transportation solutions north of Highway 401 in coordination with Augusta, which may require further studies. Three discussion papers were prepared to explore key policy issues. And other key, and these are key policy areas which are aligned with Council's 2020 strategic plan. Economic development, housing compatibility, and cultural heritage, and the subtopics listed on the slide. These policy issues were also the primary topics explored through the online visioning workshops and surveys, and public feedback received on these matters is summarized in the papers. Each discussion paper contains a series of policy recommendations for updates to the town's official plan to address these issues and implements community feedback. I'm going to forward sorry, I'm going to pass on the speaking to Anita, and she's going to present the key recommendations on the subsequent slides. We want to stress that they do not necessarily reflect an exhaustive list of updates that may be made in the official plan. So again, we would be here till 10 o'clock and we won't be. So we're just presenting key recommendations. So I'd like to turn it over now to my colleague, Anita. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nadia. And hello to all the members of council again. I was with you last week, so it's lovely to be back. Moving into the specific recommendations for the official plan review under the first topic in our discussion papers of economic development, which is quite a broad topic, as you'll see. Our first recommendation is to include official plan policies that emphasize encouraging a broad range of permitted uses and mixed-use buildings in the downtown core. This could take the form of integrating retail and commercial uses and office spaces on main streets with residential uses on upper stories, for example. And I just want to note as well that the current official plan already includes strong policy direction in this respect. The second recommendation would be to ensure that the community improvement policies in the official plan address all matters of community improvement under the Planning Act, which are permitted to be included as potential financial incentive programs in the town's community improvement plan. The third recommendation is to maintain the existing official plan policy that designates the entirety of the town as a community improvement policy area under the Planning Act, with a community improvement plan, or a CIP as the acronym goes, can apply, as well as the designation of more specific community improvement project areas where particular financial incentive programs could be made available. And I just want to clarify that specific community improvement project areas do not have to be identified in the official plan itself. They can be determined by the town at the time of preparing or updating the CIP document. The next three recommendations in the economic development discussion paper would not be implemented through the official plan review, but we felt that they were important to share with council regarding the town's existing community improvement plan, or CIP, because they are informed by quite a bit of feedback received from residents and business owners specifically. The recommendations suggest that as part of a future review of the town's existing CIP, the town should consider expanding the existing Riverwalk District and Downtown Core project area, which is illustrated in yellow on the slide here. And that expansion could include all commercially zoned properties located from south of the railway down to the river, and considering also expanding the employment project area to include all industrially and commercially zoned lands north and south of Highway 401. Finally, we would recommend potential consideration of adding more project areas, such as an up-down project area, for example, to capture commercially zoned properties that may not fall into the existing designated project areas. And in general, these recommendations would result in increased eligibility for financial incentive programs under the CIP to allow them to be expanded to more properties within the town, and hopefully leading to even more uptake of the town's already very successful CIP. Continuing with the topic of economic development, our seventh recommendation here would be to support potential commercial lodging and accommodation type uses. So anything from inns, bed and breakfasts, hotels and motels as permitted uses in appropriate land use designations. So to be explicit with that permission in the official plan. Another recommendation would be to maintain the Highway 401 corridor designation, which is illustrated in blue on the slide and is located north of the highway. And this current designation enables a range of commercial and industrial employment uses. And the official plan policies should also provide direction for the appropriate zoning of these lands as part of the town's future zoning bylaw review. We would also recommend, as recommendation 9, to add official plan policies to address the need for transition between employment uses and sensitive land uses. So those lands that are occupied by residential or institutional uses like schools or places of worship. And this would be to ensure land use compatibility and the ability of the town and future developers to mitigate potential nuisances that may be related to light pollution, noise, odor, and traffic impacts, among other issues. And this is in keeping with the PPS. Recommendation 10 would be to add official plan policies to encourage coordination and co-location of infrastructure development areas, which Nadia mentioned, located on the border with neighboring municipalities. And this would be to assist in addressing potential barriers to investment on those lands. And lastly on the slide, with respect to a large vacant area that's currently located east of the independent grocer and extends quite a bit south towards Churchill Road, consideration in the policies should be given to designating the lands for commercial and mixed uses, which are closest to the highway, as well as those existing commercial uses in that area. And any future residential uses could be located further to the south as a natural extension of existing residential areas, with potential for some green space and natural areas to be retained between those two commercial and residential areas to act as a buffer between land uses. Further economic development related recommendations include considering permitting more flexibility in permitted land uses within the town's existing industrial areas, such as allowing for other compatible uses or accessory uses to an industrial use. And an example of this would be a potential food wholesaler being enabled to add a retail or a food takeout use as an accessory to the primary use of the land through such a policy. We could also consider adding a policy for the future completion of an engineering study to determine the feasibility of extending municipal water and sewer services to properties north of Highway 401 to facilitate future industrial and commercial development. And the final economic development related recommendations include a potential official plan policy to complete a tourism asset and activity inventory or strategy in the future. And this would be in line with Council's strategic plan to support maximizing existing tourism assets, as well as local and regional partnerships. We also recommend including an official plan policy to enable the future completion of an active transportation study for the town, to identify the types and locations of active transportation facilities and infrastructure that may be needed today or in the future to support a healthy and age-friendly community as the town develops, and to provide connectivity between recreational and tourism assets. So these two types of policies would be more enabling policies. These studies wouldn't necessarily be conducted in the short term, but the OP is a 10-year document, so it can enable council to look at specific priorities in the future. We would also consider including an official plan policy, again, to support working with neighboring municipalities, and this time on a potential regional bus service or other transportation solutions to connect neighboring tourism assets between municipalities. And we understand that a regional bus service is already being explored today with neighboring municipalities. So moving on to the policy issues and our discussion paper recommendations around housing and compatibility. And compatibility refers to compatibility of development within neighborhoods in this case. Our first recommendation would be to update the existing housing supply policies in the official plan to be consistent with the 2020 provincial policy statement, which now requires that municipalities maintain the ability to accommodate residential growth for a minimum of 15 years, whether through intensification, redevelopment, and if necessary, lands designated and available for residential development. The existing official plan specifies maintaining the ability to accommodate a 10-year supply for residential growth. So the province has required an additional 5 years. The second recommendation would be to maintain and enhance where we can existing official plan policies that encourage and support a variety of housing types. And we will note that Prescott's existing policies are quite strong in this regard. And we would like to maintain these to include ground-oriented multiple residential development, higher density multifamily housing where it's appropriate, such as downtown, the provision of garden suites, additional residential units, affordable housing, as well as nonprofit housing as options. Recommendation 3 would be to maintain existing official plan policies that permit residential intensification in existing neighborhoods. So the current official plan directs that this could include forms of housing like townhouses and other types of ground-oriented multiple residential development where they may be appropriate. And lastly, on this slide, recommendation 4 would be to review existing policies in the official plan for existing residential neighborhoods where certain general maximum densities are targeted for low density development and for intensification. And we would propose to review these in consultation with town staff and also consideration of recent development proposals over the last number of years to see if these policies have generally supported development or if they have perhaps resulted in any hindrances. Continuing with housing and compatibility, we also propose to maintain existing official plan policies that permit a range of low, medium, and high density residential uses in new residential areas, while maintaining an overall density and development pattern across the town, which is in keeping with traditional residential neighborhoods. We also propose that in accordance with the Planning Act and recent changes to that act, we would revise existing official plan policies related to secondary dwelling units. So those would be, for example, basement or upper story apartments. And the Planning Act requires revisions to update the terminology to be additional residential units and to clearly permit up to 2 additional residential units on a lot that has a single detached, semi-detached, or row house dwelling as the primary dwelling unit. So the Planning Act changes would now permit the primary dwelling, as well as a additional residential unit within that dwelling, so a basement apartment, for example, as well as another additional residential unit in an ancillary structure. So, for example, a separate apartment in a detached garage. Recommendation 7 would be to maintain existing official plan policies that support proposed development, which complements and contributes to the character of the town. The next recommendation, building upon that, would be another enabling policy for a potential future neighborhood character study and urban design guidelines. So we know that the town already has urban design guidelines for the downtown area, but a neighborhood character study could be specifically targeted at identifying the prevalent character that distinguishes the various residential neighborhoods in Prescott, and this would be done in consultation with residents and could result in the preparation of design guidelines for residential infill development that would assist in ensuring that any future development respects and enhances that identified neighborhood character. We would also propose to maintain existing official plan policies around compatibility, which are located throughout the official plan. Some of these include the requirement for site plan approval for all new non-residential development, residential development that has 3 or more units, and any waterfront development in the town. Another existing policy around compatibility that we propose to maintain would be the requirement that all new residential development, including any residential intensification, provides adequate off-street parking, so on-site parking. There are also existing requirements for buffering and screening between new residential and non-residential development, as well as required minimum separation distances, and these policies should also be maintained, as well as ensuring that all new commercial development provides adequate off-street parking and that access is avoided from residential streets to new commercial development. Finally, we recommend adding a new section in the official plan to really emphasize all of these compatibility directions. And this could be entitled Compatibility and Built Form. And this policy would set out a specific set of criteria for consideration by town staff, the Planning Advisory Committee and Council in reviewing development applications. And some criteria for consideration may include height and massing of proposed development, landscaping, lighting, noise, parking, shadowing, and traffic impacts, among others. And the idea would be that proponents of proposed development could be required to address these criteria in their documents or planning rationales that they submit to the town with their development applications. And the onus would be on those developers to demonstrate how their proposal responds to the criteria and existing development on surrounding properties. Finally, our last policy topic and set of recommendations pertain to cultural heritage. And the primary recommendation here is to maintain the town's policies regarding cultural heritage and archaeological resources. There are only minor updates required to be consistent with the terminology and definitions in the Ontario Heritage Act and the provincial policy statement, and that has been confirmed through our pre-consultation with the ministries. We also included 2 additional recommendations in our discussion paper, but these would be outside the purview of the official plan review. For example, our second recommendation is to consider further financial incentives for private property owners to maintain and improve their historic or designated heritage properties. And to this end, the town could consider updates to the existing CIP to consider, for example, increasing the maximum value of existing grants to encourage more applications. The town could consider permitting multiple grants for the same designated heritage property in consecutive years, for example. There's also the potential to expand eligibility for grants to properties that are not only designated heritage properties under the Ontario Heritage Act, but also those properties that the town considers to be of cultural heritage value or interest, but which are not designated by the, under the provincial framework. And there could also be consideration given to expanding the programs under Area 3 heritage buildings in the town CIP to introduce a tax increment equivalent grant program that's available in the other areas to help offset any municipal tax increases that may result from a property reassessment once a property owner completes improvements or a redevelopment project. And lastly, again, outside the official plan review, but also outside the CIP, the town could consider a separate heritage property tax relief program, which is enabled through the Municipal Act and allows municipalities to offer tax reductions or refunds in respect to eligible heritage properties which are designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And these properties and this program would be subject to a voluntary heritage conservation agreement that the municipality would enter into with a property owner. So these last two recommendations are really to help further incentivize private property owners to maintain and improve their properties, whether they are considered historic or actually designated under the Heritage Act. So to end our presentation, we will briefly review the immediate next steps in the official plan review process. We anticipate a draft official plan and schedules being submitted to town staff for preliminary review next month in May 2021. And following any revisions out of those discussions, in June, a draft official plan would be submitted to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for their initial 90-day review and comment. And that draft official plan would also be posted on the town's project website for public review. In early fall of this year, and following the ministry's review as required under the Planning Act, we would then hold a statutory public open house, which would be held to present and obtain community feedback on the draft official plan. And at this point, giving consideration to public health measures, it's really unknown whether that statutory public open house would occur in person or virtually, but it can proceed in either manner under the Planning Act. So that concludes our presentation component for this evening. We're very grateful for the opportunity to present our official plan review recommendations, and both Nadia and I would be pleased to answer any questions. And we look forward to some of the public delegations tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sott. We'll open it up now for comments, questions from members of council on that very thorough, but also very brief presentation tonight. Thanks for distilling it down to the key points there. So I'll open it up to members of council for comments, questions to our experts from WSP this evening. Councillor Jansman, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. With the possible growing popularity of tiny homes, would that be something that would need to be mentioned in the official plan if we wanted to allow that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we can, if that is an option for consideration, we can include policies around tiny homes. It is a form of housing that could be available should someone want to provide that on their property. Many municipalities do, and it is a form of different form of housing that would be permitted through the Planning Act and as part of the housing options for municipalities to create a diverse, sorry, I'm having trouble speaking today, a diverse housing form. So yes, the answer is yes, we can include the policies around that.
Okay, thank you. Also, to follow up, Mayor Todd, if I could, I was a lot to take in but we had it for quite some time, so I'm sure everybody read it over, but still a lot to take in for that, especially economic development. But the third one, the heritage property, I really want to support that, how much I enjoy the both second and third recommendation. And then my third comment would be with public health being such a common visitor in our homes now, was public health part of the engagement as well for the official plan?
Go ahead, Anita.
Oh, sorry, Nadia, through you, Mr. Mayor. Public health was not a specific policy issue that we addressed as part of the online visioning workshops. We were really looking towards policy topics that would address specific growth and development and land use issues. Public health is certainly entwined in everything that goes on in the municipality. As we've all learned, it affects not just land use, but mental health, physical health,
Exactly.
working
Yes.
from home, employment. So I think a lot of municipalities are considering how to address things like a global pandemic in their municipal response and in their land use policies. And we don't have any specific recommendations this evening, but that's certainly a continuing discussion that we can have with town staff and council moving forward, and ask the public their input on as part of future engagement opportunities as well.
Thank you, Anita. That's exactly what I was trying to get at, is exactly the whole mental health being built into and weaved into our official plan. So that would be great. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, that really is an excellent point. It's actually one I brought up with Matthew, just speaking earlier today about how we would potentially incorporate some of the lessons learned from the pandemic. But since we're still very much in the middle of the pandemic right now, it's going to be difficult to assess things with any lasting impact at the moment. But it's definitely something that we have to keep an eye on as a municipality, and I'm sure the province will keep an eye on that as well, because I can see a lot of things changing across the board here due to the societal impact of the pandemic overall. I don't know what that's coming from, but
growling.
Yeah, probably a message for me to keep it short. So I'll end it there anyways, but just note that was a good point. I'll open it up for further comments. I see Councillor Burton has her hand up. Please, Leanne.
Thank you, Mayor Todd, and thank you again for the wonderful presentation. Should we be looking at creating a policy that represents our vision and plan for all the parks and green space that we have here in Prescott?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So as part of our background report, we have reviewed other municipal plans that have been completed to date, including the town's recreation and master plan. And so we have, in our background report, we have pulled out recommendations that have a land use angle to it. And so depending on what further thinking you would have, Councillor Burton, but we always have policies and official plans to deal with parks. So there's the parkland dedication that's required under the Planning Act, and that's and then there's also open space, which is a different form of park space. And so we do get into policies regarding parks and open space, active and passive space. So we would build upon the work that's done, that has been done through the Recreation Master Plan, and help augment with policies in the official plan. And just to piggyback on the public health, I mean, there's so many things that that deal with community well-being. And so there's parks, there's even amenity areas as part of apartment buildings, so many different facets. And we do look at that whole picture when we are writing official plans. We're not just looking at one dimension. So it does play a role in many, not just land use, but it does play a role in how we enjoy our communities and how we plan for them.
Great, thank you so much. That was my next comment about mental health and incorporating that into the parks and our green space. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Thank you, Ms. DeSanti. Other comments, questions from council this evening? Councillor McConnell, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Excuse me. Under the section titled Ministry One Window Pre-Consultation Comments, I have a question. It says add policies for human-made hazards, and it gives an example, abandoned mine sites. We don't have any abandoned mine sites that I'm aware of in Prescott, but I think you said within a kilometer of town, did you not?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The provincial policy statement, and the ministries do require that the Ministry of Energy, Northern Development and Mines is consulted for any development that's proposed in proximity, so within 1 kilometer proximity to an abandoned mine site. And it is confirmed that there are no abandoned mine sites within the town boundary, but there are known sites in neighboring municipalities within 1 kilometer of the Prescott border. So if any development were to be proposed within 1 kilometer, that ministry would simply be circulated by town staff for input on that proposed development and if there are any concerns. So right now, the official plan, I don't believe, contains those human-made hazard policies, which are required under the PPS.
If I may, Mayor Todd, I'm presuming by mine sites, you must mean quarries.
It could be, yeah, it could be abandoned quarries.
Well, that makes it rather difficult because there's an abandoned quarry basically on our eastern border, which if you're looking at 1 kilometer is going to take in half the town if we want to do anything. It doesn't seem reasonable to me.
Pardon me, Councillor, it doesn't mean that development is precluded. It just means that the ministry needs to be contacted for information specific to that abandoned mine site to see if there are any restrictions or minimum separation distances, for example.
Yeah, I'm assuming that just means notice needs to be given to the ministry, and then they would contact us if they had any further comments or questions.
That's right.
I see. The other question I had was in the same section. It says, consider policies to address goods movement along the 401 corridor through a joint study with the Township of Augusta. That seems like a provincial thing to me that doesn't have very much relation to the town of Prescott. Goods movement along the 401 corridor. The 401 goes through Prescott. We do have an interchange here. We do have a trucking company. Well, actually, there's one just north of town and one just east of town as well. So there's a lot of trucking companies in the area, but I don't know what possible input we could have there or what possible input they would have towards us.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so goods movement, yes, I mean, it is on the provincial highway, but transportation as a whole, not just within the town, but also that more of a regional perspective is important from an official plan policy, so that it's looked at recognizing that we've got the highway, it is a goods movement. What are the land uses that need to be considered along that highway 401? So it's not, it's more of a regional perspective and a regional policy. I can also, if I can share, we're working with a Northern Ontario municipality, and one of their regional bus operators had asked for official plan policies to recognize not goods, but passengers movement and intercity bus travel. So transportation is a factor that needs to be considered in official plans, and it's not just the roads, you know, within the town boundary, but it's also that regional perspective of transportation, and in this case, it's goods movement along Highway 401. So it's acknowledging that, it's acknowledging what does that bring to the town from an economic development perspective, what does that bring forward for us from a growth perspective, what kind of land uses should we be looking at along the 401, as Anita had presented. So it's a bit of a higher level view and policy matter that we need to look at and explore from a policy perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McConnell. That's actually one I underlined as well, because from being involved in very heavily with leading the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus effort to expand the 401 and also deal with the transportation of dangerous goods after we had that spate of horrible accidents back in 2017 here. I know there's a real federal component to that as well, of course, because they cover the act that determines what's hazardous and what isn't. And that's actually we went down the road there a little bit back in, I think it was early 2018. We had the last significant meeting on it, and the province is moving now on the engineering study that they promised. I do have to thank Ministers Clark and Mulroney for getting that going for us a couple of years ago, and everyone's gotten their notice in the paper just recently of the engineering for the lane expansion that is being handled here locally in the weeks ahead. So that's going to affect this in terms of transporting goods on the 401 overall. So that's just, I guess, another. It's not really connects to the OP specifically, but it is something that will impact on the vehicles and the goods that are transported into and around Prescott. So there already is a real regional effort on this to try to get to the bottom of it, because we're all really concerned about when we do have the 401 closed, what sort of hazardous goods are going right through fairly heavily populated or densely populated areas like Brockville, Prescott, Gananoque, so forth, that have that the secondary route through the towns when the 401 is shut down. So it's a good thing to keep an eye on, and I'd love to read a little more about that when we get the draft back. And I don't know if there's anything else that Anita and Nadia, if you'd want to comment on that, or is that's where we are?
No further comments, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councilor McConnell, did you have anything else, or was that?
No, that was it, Mayor Todd. Thank you.
Thank you. For other comments, anyone else have a comment or question this evening for our friends from WSP? Not seeing anybody jump in. I've just got a couple myself I'd just like to mention this evening. Nothing major. I really appreciate the overall. I mean, a lot of it is, I'm not going to say it's status quo, because it represents a lot of improvements in a lot of areas and some really good enhancements. But at the same time, I don't think we're reinventing the wheel here either. I think it also shows that we're on the right track, because there are a number of items there that, as the presenters noted, we're already working on. But my major concern, as I've mentioned before, is and I just go back to the growth management analysis page that shows very stagnant growth over the next 20 years. And I'll note that study was done early last year, and obviously things have changed dramatically there with housing patterns and people moving out of the cities. So, I mean, if we even did that today, perhaps it would be different. But I just want to say that analysis is not that's not destiny here. I mean, it depends on that's basically an assessment of what it would be like going forward if we didn't do really anything. And if we do embrace the PPP and the sort of the PPS and what they're recommending for denser development, I think we can certainly surpass those numbers. And I think we have to just to make sure that we remain a livable town, and we have a tax base that supports the services that we provide residents. I think we need to go above and beyond that analysis there and make sure that, I mean, it's got to be good, sustainable growth. It's got to be sensible growth that befits the town's character and so forth. But at the same time, I think we can embrace growth in a positive way that is good for all our residents. So that's just something I just wanted to note. And the other thing I'll just mention in there, and I don't have anything to add to this tonight, but we are working on the housing affordability committee with United Counties right now. And we're looking at that. We're actually meeting again on Wednesday, and we've been meeting for about 6 months now, and we'll have some real recommendations coming forward shortly. And I know one of them is that we make sure that our land use policies and our official plans and zoning, and however we can, we sort of bring everybody under the same umbrella with the United Counties. So we really help with affordable housing development across Leeds and Grenville. So we can all make sure that affordable housing is a key platform going forward for development, because as we all know, we're getting into a situation now where we keep going like this, we're going to see a whole generation shut out of the ability to buy a home. And traditionally, that's always been something that's been very possible in Prescott, in our part of the province. And it's becoming increasingly out of reach right now, as we all know, through the housing sales under COVID. This could be a bubble, it could burst, or it could represent a new reality. At any rate, I think our plans have to take that into account and make sure we have affordable housing for development in the future. So I do want to mention that. And recommendations for ECDEV, the CIP expansion, I think that's a great idea, but it is something we're going to have to make sure we've got the money set aside to do so, because we've got some good uptake on that in the downtown. If we expand it across the town, obviously we're going to have to be able to have the money in the budgets to come to make sure that we meet that need. What else did I have? Oh, yeah, recommendation. The other one in that section as well was on expanding Riverwalk up to Dibble West. I wonder if there's a case to be made to go up even a little farther, because we do have some commercial further up on Edward Street. Perhaps downtown and even Riverwalk district could be defined as anything south of the CN overpass, as we do have commercial development on that north part of Edward Street. So perhaps that could be looked at and expand that neighborhood a little bit farther. Just a talking point there, because there are at least 3 commercial establishments north of the zone being entertained. Housing tiny homes, I think, is a great idea. The idea of adding the secondary dwelling units, though, and I know the province is really pushing that. I don't think we've got much of a choice on that at this point with provincial zoning and so forth, and what they're pushing in the policy statement. But I just want to make sure we're very cautious about that. I guess that would be down to zoning later on, simply because we don't want. I could see it being a problem if we're letting everyone in town basically put secondary dwelling units in their backyards right up against neighbors and so forth. I'm just saying that's got to be planned out fully, and I know it will be if and when we implement something like that. I think it's good infill in some ways, but we've got to watch out for existing residents. And the other one I just had on heritage and the heritage property tax relief. I'd like to see more on that, because I like the concept of it, but I'm always wary about giving tax benefits to people just based on the fact they may own an older Victorian home or historic home. I really don't like segregating tax classes like that. So we've got somebody who owns a house built in 1900 receiving tax benefits that someone doesn't get, who just happens to own a home built in, say, 1940 or 1960 or even a couple of years ago. So I think there's got to be a balance there. I think that could potentially be used right, but I'm always wary about that as well. And at the end of the day, the overall, you can give people breaks all you want, but somebody's still got to pay the tax bill at the end of the day. And I just don't want to see the burden fall on people in town that are having a hard time making ends meet as they're going. So that would be my only concern on the heritage, on that heritage tax relief. But I'd like to see more about how that would actually work in terms of an actual policy. But that's all I have this evening. Did anyone else have any other comments for WSP tonight? Anything else from staff, Matthew, on the presentation so far?
No, I don't think so from my perspective. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for the input tonight, and we will move on to item 5. This is a public meeting intended to solicit public response tonight. And under delegations, under 5 tonight, we do have 2 citizens who've come forward to present delegations. I really want to thank both Sandra Wan and Sandra Eisman for coming in tonight to present, and also thank them both for the written submissions as well, which we received earlier today. So we do have Mrs. Wan set up first for item 5.1. I do want to note we've got a maximum of 10 minutes to address council here for each presentation tonight. I'm not sitting here with a stopwatch or anything, but I would ask both presenters to try to keep as close to the 10 minutes as possible, as we do have a really busy schedule tonight. But I want to welcome you both, and we'll start off with Mrs. Wan's presentation. Welcome, Sandra. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, it's a pleasure to be able to join you, and you've all received my my written comments. Is there anyone that hasn't received them or hasn't read them? Ray, have you read those yet? Not yet. Okay. So what I planned in my comments was just to make some points with respect to my statement. And I'd like to start off by recognizing the fact that when my husband and I came to Prescott in 1965, it wasn't long before we were knee-deep in community events. And in the 1970s, working on an environmental group, called Organization Hope. And the mayor of the day called me up and said, how would you like to be on the planning board? And I said, what's the planning board? And he wasn't 100% sure, but it seemed to fit with the fact that I am a biologist and very interested in the well-being of my community. So I did serve on the planning board as chair and as a member. and learned a great deal. So I really respect the work that Nadia and Anita have been doing, because being a planner, a land use planner, is a very responsible position. My problem was I kept saying to my colleagues, what comes first? Is it the zoning bylaw or the official plan? But believe me, I learned a great deal in the incoming years about planning. And as Mayor Prescott for 15 years and chair of the Economic Development Commission, and the initiator of a lot of very important tourism events, I have extreme interest in what our community is about to do. So I'm going to stick with my my written presentation, but just in a very superficial way. I feel very strongly about the new provincial policy statement, and I've gone over it carefully. I did have input into not the last one, but the one before that, on behalf of the whole issue around Walkerton. And I'm making a recommendation because you're basing your official plan, our new official plan on your strategic plan. And respectfully, I would like to suggest that it has only 3 pillars. And this is one of the things that I think is very important to the community, would be that 4th pillar that has to do with health and well-being, safety. So I make a respectful suggestion that when you take a good close look at what your strategic plan looks like, and imagine that that this pillar would be a welcome addition. I'm also very interested in aspects of mental health. Some of you will remember that I did try to bring that up at a strategic planning meeting, but wasn't allowed to do so. But I'd like to suggest that because mental health is an extremely important aspect of health today, and it's definitely being brought more to the surface with the pandemic, that you revisit some of these things. Now the health center is going to be owned by the county, but I do believe that the warden of the county, for example, is a former psychiatric nurse. So hopefully there will be something somewhere in all of this where we recognize the importance of having a focus on health and safety. Also, the natural resources and the Upper St. Lawrence shoreline recharge areas, shoreline protection, trees. I've actually written an urban forestry policy for the town, and it was provided to the town through the Communities in Bloom. I don't know that you've seen it or used it, but we're updating it, or myself and my colleagues are updating it. It will be useful. And there are some things that you, like in terms of the waterfront, the opportunities around naturalized areas, focus on the recharge, natural sound barriers, parks, and the urban forest. And I'd like to see a climate change plan as well, addressing the extremes in precipitation that are already here. Those of us old enough to remember the ice storm, hopefully remember that was one of the recommendations of our ice storm committee that I chaired, was that municipalities need to be preparing for the extremes in precipitation, extremes in weather, and changes in our climate. The conservation of built heritage resources and cultural application, cultural heritage. that is extremely important. And I just add a little tidbit about the heritage that the community to music in the community. And I have remembrance of that because I just was delivered great arms full of old pieces of music that Pat Kingston had in his possession, and it is quite historic in nature, a lot of it. And I think this might be something that could be added to the museum, but I hope that you're ensuring that you have expert people doing the work, people with the credentials to do the work to see it. This is the Economic Planning Group of Canada in 1984 did a tourism strategy that if you read it again, you'll find that there's still an ongoing group. And it was then in 1984, when Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth were here, I maintain that their presence was the beginning of us getting really serious about tourism. We did have Fort Wellington and Loyalist Days, but that event with the Prince and Queen Elizabeth, I think, was a turning point. It showed the world really what a small town like Prescott was capable of doing. I also want to point out specifically, because I've heard some of you talking about hotels and whether it's a hotel or a motel and so on. But I wanted to be sure that you were all well informed about the fact that there are letters patent on the 3.85 acres immediately adjacent to the marina part of the harbor, just to the east of it. These are federal letters patent, and hopefully you've provided them to our consultants. But they say that that piece of land must be used as a heritage hotel, strictly controlled heights and so on. And if it is to be used for something, or if it is not going to be used for a heritage hotel, it must be sold back to the Crown. And they even set a price of $300,000. And we've sold quite a bit of our heritage, and but 300,000 would be certainly quite welcome, I'm sure. But I think more welcome to the community would be the proper kind of hotel on the waterfront. And the I think also, just sort of tying it all together, when we look at the impact that COVID has had on our community, and listening to the presentation of the federal budget 2021, they're putting a huge focus on the tourism as the part of the economy that has been very hard hit. I think we're in an ideal location for a whole lot of reasons. We have many assets, and I look to the official plan to protect those assets, enhance them, and make sure that we are moving ahead as a very viable and progressive small town in Eastern Ontario.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lawn, for that presentation tonight. Much appreciated, and thanks for putting everything down in written form as well. So we'll move on to our next presenter tonight, and welcome Sandra Eisman. And again, Sandra, if you could try to keep to around that 10-minute mark, please, so we can move on to our next meeting here this evening. Don't want to rush you, but please, when we do have your written presentation as well. Thanks so much for providing that. So over to you for your presentation, please.
Okay, thanks so much. I just want to introduce myself. I'm sure all of you pretty much know who I am at this point, but I have a master's in environmental studies with a certificate in urban planning, urban and regional planning, as well as I did my PhD in engineering, which was basically urban planning. My focus was climate change and adapting urban planning to climate change. So I come to you, as a concerned citizen, but also someone with a background and expertise in what I'm about to speak of. So I just want to add, I would like to add a pillar as well. So Sandra mentioned adding a fourth pillar. I think we should add a fifth pillar. Why not? You know, it's going to be environment that I'm going to recommend, because when I review the official plan, the proposal, and the great presentation we saw today, I do notice that the environment is glaringly missing. I know that in section 1.1.1E 1, there is, you know, the need to include consultation around hazards, natural features, and how those could be affected, such as wildfires. There was also the need to review potential flooding along the St. Lawrence. But I think that's just so bare bones. You know, this is kind of like, so one of the things that I really kind of paid attention to when I was looking, you know, like I started working as a planner and realized, wow, I really can't fathom doing what I really think needs to be done if I just sort of stick as an urban planner, because I can see all these holes and gaps missing in our policy. So, you know, I kind of more went a different route, but what I really see is if we sort of just go the basic policies that have been outlined by government, you know, maybe we'll meet those kind of basic needs, but we're going to be no better off than Toronto is, or Ottawa is, and, you know, Halifax is. And I don't know if any of you have paid attention, you know, to the extreme weather impacts that happen in those municipal areas. But we see they're getting hit by extreme windstorms, extreme rainstorms, extreme ice storms. They've got drought, they've got heat waves. All of these impact their economy. It impacts jobs. I was working on Health Canada policy that would dictate what kind of heat conditions workers should have to endure. And because of climate change, those heat conditions are only going to increase and become, you know, more of a problem. So, you know, I'm not coming to you just as a tree hugger. I'm a tree hugger. I'm not going to deny that. But I'm actually coming to you as someone who's also read a lot of studies by economists and insurance companies who really caution around developing our natural capital. So when we talk about natural capital, we're talking about the green environmental services that our natural features do. And studies have shown time again, how many of you have heard about the people that go around pollinating the blossoms on the apple trees in the orchards? Because they don't have bees. They don't have bees anymore. So they actually have to pay people to go with a paintbrush, pollinate the flowers. You know what? They don't do as good a job because they do it not in the way a bee would do it. So, you know, we can try to replace these natural, you know, services that are provided to us by our environment, but we're never going to do as good of a job. So what do these features provide us? I've tried to outline it in the various recommendations I've made. You know, we've got sanitation services, water filtration, air filtration, soil filtration. Any of you here, you know, having any underlying health conditions, you can really thank, you know, trees and wetlands for filtering the air pollution coming from the 401, because that's significantly decreasing your chance of suffering an emergency visit to the hospital or from mortality. So there are a number of studies. I can get studies for you on anything I've been speaking about or that I've written about. It's all there. So what I'm recommending is, let's not just do the basics, you know, because we're seeing it's not getting our cities that are bigger than us, who are progressive at this point and have already, you know, kind of tried to go back and undo some of the damage they've done. But let's actually be super progressive and super attractive to future businesses. You know, we could really come up with, you know, a plan that protects our natural infrastructure and our natural features, as well as helps us economically with businesses and jobs. And I'm not here to recommend, you know, what this new economic strategy looks like. What I'm here to say is I think we need to really first get our environmental strategies and plans in place, and then work with our economic development, you know, whatever that is. If we've got a committee, it sounds like we don't yet, but we need to then kind of mesh those strategies together. Because, you know, it will cost Lord Stern Economic Review on Climate Change estimates that it's going to be hundreds of trillions of dollars in climate change costs, you know, within the next millennia, like by 2100, it's just going to be too much for us actually to pay for. And another thing, Mark Carney, who's the former Banker of Canada, former Banker of London, Bank of London in the UK, who's now delegate to the UN, he has recently been talking about, we're all worried about COVID, but climate change is actually going to result in the displacement of hundreds of millions of people potentially by 2100, and numerous mortalities. So we're very lucky here. One of the things I love about Prescott, aside from how wonderful and beautiful and friendly it is I actually love that we kind of have this little climate protection. It feels like, because I've lived in cities, I've lived all over the world, and I know what heat stress really feels like and looks like. We haven't suffered that here. Toronto regularly has days over 40 degrees now. It's kind of unlivable. And, we're concerned about people that don't have, financial means. They don't have air conditioning. I've never had air conditioning in my life because I prefer not to, but I do know, like, air conditioning, if I look at installing it, it's very expensive. So that's just one thing we have to think about. A lot of people can't afford to live in a climate impacted society. There's also, the fact of flooding. Everyone will now have to install sump pumps in their basement. That's just kind of across the board in Toronto in the urban planning department. If you want to build, you have to put a sump pump in your basement now. So and then windstorms, people are just constantly being hit by a different kind of extreme weather event in every season at this point, whether it's in Toronto. We saw the entirety of Rideau Street collapse with a sinkhole and put all those businesses, under pressure. And that was a tremendous economic loss. And that's, a result of many things, including when you have drought, severe drought. That's one of the impacts. So, I am here as a tree hugger, but also somebody very concerned in numbers and economics and insurance. One more thing I'd like to point out is that if we do permit building in zones that are not safe for building, or if it results in the diverting of those impacts to someone else's property, we're opening up ourselves to a lawsuit. Not to mention, people are starting to sue their governments for reckless climate change action. Farmers are suing states when there's inaction on climate change, and it's ruining their business. So that's why, first and foremost, I think you saw, I'm not going to read my statement because you all have it. I'd really appreciate if you could all take the time to read it. But yeah, so I think first and foremost that we start with an environmental committee. We have to take inventory of our natural features. We have to take inventory of our forests, our wetlands, whatever else other kind of natural features we have. We need a historical record as well. We have to try to restore what we can. It's funny how rivers don't like being buried. I don't know what we have here. We seems to have a really good historical knowledge, Councillor McConnell, a really good historical knowledge of Prescott. I'm sure some of the other councillors do as well. But I would love to be able to sort of really, figure out what it is we have, what are we working with, try to do a cost analysis of what these benefits are. And then, I think that only when we've kind of done that can we really estimate what would be smart development and what that looks like. And I think we need to really implement strong environmental design guidelines. I don't know how many of you have been to the south of Germany. It's beautiful. McDonald's put up a giant stink. They wanted their yellow arches. The whole town in Constance, Freiburg, Freiburg with the beautiful Cinderella castle. Anyways, they really wanted to put their big golden arches. Germany really put their foot down and they said no. And guess what? McDonald's still has customers, even though they have this little sign saying McDonald's, and it blends in with the rest of the historical facade. The point of my story is that we don't have to have same old. We can develop something new in terms of design guidelines, and businesses will still do well and will be progressive and innovative and will be part of the climate economy, which is happening whether we like it or not. So that's my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eisman, and thanks again for the written presentation as well that all council has too. I want to thank you for spending the time with us this evening. The one comment though I just had, that was actually a bit of a thread with both presentations tonight. So I will give WSP just one chance to comment on this, because there is the sense that there isn't an environmental pillar in the strategic plan, and the idea of more environmental dedicated policies and so forth. But the way I've understood it, and I know the way we discussed this when we did our strategic plan review about I guess about 14 months ago now. I think it was January 2020. Just before the world changed. And we basically made the decision at that point, if I'm remembering correctly, that we'd look at virtually everything through a green lens and an environmental lens, to the point where we have added that to our staff report. So it is something that is always before us. And that's basically my how I read the OP update as well. So Nadia and Anita, can you either of you comment on that and how we are addressing this very real climate crisis that the world is finding itself in now?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So again, even though the strategic plan has 3 pillars, we do look at environment, and we will be looking at those policies and augmenting those policies, and we will look at the submissions made tonight and today by Ms. Eisman and Ms. Lawn, and any other future public comments. With respect to climate change, one of the ways that municipalities are addressing that is to really do more work and actually come up with a climate change and adaptation plan. So that's more of a solid look at that. But without that in place right now, we can look at some of those policies and really see what we can do to help further that discussion. And perhaps there's another piece of work that has to be done at a more scientific level that looks at data and different group of people who would be preparing for that, because that is there's modeling involved, there's data, there's all sorts of things that Anita and I are not experts in, but a lot of municipalities do prepare those separate plans. And one of the things that we can address that through official plan policies is looking at and requiring, for example, developments, looking at alternatives for stormwater management runoff, for example. So looking at other solutions such as low impact development, so through design, through other different means for which we can definitely embed in official plan policies to help deal with excessive rainstorms, for example. So that's one of the ways, well, a couple of ways that we can address that in the official plan. So definitely environment is, it is something that we look at for sure. We, as I mentioned, we just like we look at community well-being. It's not one, we don't look at the official plan as, just a couple of things. It really is a whole spectrum of things that we need to look at. And one of the things that I want to just sort of maybe conclude with, I'm happy to answer any further questions, but one of the things that I want to conclude with is I've been involved in the preparation of many age-friendly community action plans and strategies. And those plans are based on the World Health Organization of an age-friendly community in 8 dimensions. So you look at a community with 8 dimensions, and only 3 of those dimensions are hard infrastructure. That being transportation, housing, open spaces, your buildings and open spaces. The other 5 are what I call social infrastructure, and that's your civic participation, employment, communications, and information. And what we do is we also apply that age-friendly lens that looks at communities, that looks at policy documents to ensure that we're touching upon things that are not just hard infrastructure. You can have the best roads, you can have the best parks, you can have the best heritage buildings, but there's other components that make up a community. And so to get to that health and well-being, we do look at policies that we are that we embed in official plans when we develop them, to look at those softer aspects, but they do have an impact and they are integrated with land use planning. So I just wanted to touch.
Yeah, with all due respect though, I don't, like, I'm hearing what you're saying, but it doesn't sound to me like that is necessarily addressing, very
Andrew, we
sort
can't
of,
go back and forth tonight. I'm sorry.
okay. Sorry, there was just one thing I wanted to,
Happy to
sorry,
get
Mr. Can I just add one final thing? I just wanted to say, I appreciate all the green space and everything, but I did want to bring attention to, and this is one issue of concern, is that green space does not provide the same function as conservation lands, right? Green space, traditionally lawns. So I appreciate, you're bringing in, green space, parkland, mental health, and how that benefits, but nothing can replace the environmental services that actual conservation lands provide, as well as actual, human health aspects, because it's known, forests will actually provide a certain amount of physical, mental health that a park with just a few trees cannot. But please, like, I don't know if you've seen my my recommendations, Nadia, but I have some very comprehensive recommendations, such as joining the Conservation Authority, figuring out what those new floodlines are. And I agree, we need modeling. We need scientific modeling.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I was part of the Rogers group where my internet was down until 4:45 p.m. today, but I did have a chat with Anita and town staff just to kind of catch up on some of the things and some questions that I had. So we will be looking at all submissions, and what I'm saying is that the environment is part of our review when we look at an official plan, and we do look at climate change, and we do look at other items. So I can rest assured that it is something that we always look at when we're looking at official plans. So we will be looking at that, and I will read your detailed written comments.
Last question
tomorrow.
though, can we actually add it? Because the problem is it's not actually in the official plan. So I'm not saying, hey, let's review through a climate lens. I'm saying let's include actual environmental, regulations and requirements and strategies and demand for task force in the actual official plan, because that's missing right now.
We gotta move on. We can't get into a back and forth here tonight, or we will be here.
Thank you. I've said
not
everything.
It is very important, but Nadia, did you have any final comments there based on the environmental concepts we're just talking about?
What I can say is this is one of the kind of this is part of our community engagement. The discussion is not going to end tonight, so let us take that away. Let us look at it, and we're happy to have further discussions as needed, and let's see how we can incorporate that, and that's our commitment to the community and to the town. So the discussion doesn't end here. So let us take that away, and Anita, feel free to augment with anything. Thank you.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor, and to further build on Nadia's comments to Ms. Eisman's concerns, I did want to specifically state that there will be natural heritage system policies in the new official plan, which are, I'm not going to say missing, but are not as fulsome as the provincial policy statement requires to be included in municipal official plans. So we will be introducing policies as well as mapping to identify what the province has designated provincially significant, but other areas such as unevaluated wetlands, so that town council, future developers, and the general public are aware of where these environmental locations are currently in the town, and conservation and protection policies around those features. For example, the requirement to do environmental impact studies when development is proposed near those features. So I just wanted to assure Ms. Eisman, but also members of the public who may be listening, that share those environmental concerns. The official plan will not miss out on that topic and looking at natural environment in detail.
Thank you. I think we can do more than minimum, but thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight and for answering my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again to Anita and Nadia for providing the update this evening and the very thorough review. Thanks to everyone involved tonight. Some good feedback, some great points from both of our presenters as well. And we'll make sure now that Rogers is back up and running again, everybody's properly connected. We'll be able to get all that. I know that was quite the disruption for a good chunk of today. I heard it kind of across the board there for people. Tellus had it, I think, about 2 weeks ago as well. So it's kind of going around right now. So one thing I just will add, just on the environmental piece and also the economic development, everybody probably is aware of this as well, but it was noted by both presenters on working with our regional partners here in South Grenville. And I'll just note again, we're very closely, our relationship's never been closer actually than with the Township of Augusta right now. We are working on that economic development plan right now. And I will note that in the meetings of the task force that our council and Augusta's council set up a number of months ago, that I've been meeting with regularly with our other representative, Councillor Shankar, it has been discussed, conservation lands and so forth. So, please, you can't look at Prescott in a vacuum here in the area. It's not to say we won't do all that we can to be part of the climate challenge a solution. We're certainly never going to shirk our responsibility there, but we do have Augusta right next to us, and we are working on regional plans there as well to ensure that this entire region is well taken care of when it comes to conservation lands, wetlands, and so forth. Prescott is, as much as we're a small town, we are the urban center of the region, so there is a certain amount of obviously development. The focus is going to be here on intensification of residential development and so forth to coincide with the provincial policy statement. So we do have to take that into account as well. But just know that we're not looking at this as Prescott in a vacuum. We are working very closely with the Township of Augusta on all economic development matters, and that very much includes the protection of our green spaces, our conservation areas, our wetlands, and how that impacts on development and so forth. So we're doing the best we can to work with our friends in Augusta when it comes to sustainable development for the entire region. So I want to thank everyone tonight. We do have to move along because we do have a very extensive council meeting still to come. That was supposed to have started 5 minutes ago. But again, I want to thank everybody for the great input this evening. Everything will be obviously taken under advisement, and next steps are we bring back the draft in May, I believe. And Mr. Armstrong, any comments on that, on those next steps? I know it was covered by Nadia and Anita at the end of their presentation, but anything else you'd like to emphasize before we leave off this evening?
Just that if the council wishes to provide staff with direction to proceed with the draft official plan, then certainly that would be appreciated. Or if there's additional information required, then certainly that can be addressed as well.
And by that, if we do go down that road with that motion this evening, that is just the draft, of course. So that's still leaving the ability for changes, additions, and alterations, of course.
Yes.
Just so that's clear to the public, the presenters, and so forth tonight, that we're not making any final decisions here. So Mr. Armstrong is requesting that motion this evening that will enable us to move on to the next steps in the process with the draft plan. Could I have a mover on that, please? Moved by Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. I think he just beat Gory. Any discussion on that this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. So we'll have that draft back in May. And again, I want to thank both of our presenters this evening. Nadia and Anita, excellent job. Good to get this in front of us. There's some great stuff there. And also want to thank Sandra Eisman and Sandra Wan for their presentations tonight. Always great to have that great public involvement. And of course, we did have quite a number of responses in the public survey portion of this as well. And I don't want to get into the comment about that further this evening because we've been here for a while now. But at some point when we bring the draft back, maybe a comment on the public process here, just to ensure that the public knows how much we sought to engage public responses here. And I believe we're quite successful in it. I mean, you're never going to get a ton of public input on this unless there's something very pressing and very controversial, and thankfully we don't have either at the moment. But I would like a comment on that if we could before we go into the draft when this is brought back. But other than that, I want to thank our presenters from WSP tonight and thank everyone for the great discussion. So moving on, we're at item 6, confirming bylaw for tonight's special meeting. That's
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.
And confirming bylaw tonight, 22-2021. The recommendation reads bylaw 22-2021, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting held on April 19th, 2021, be read and passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and sealed by the seal of the corporation. Can I ask for a mover, please? Moved by Councilor Burton, seconded by Councilor Shankar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. And item 7, adjournment. Could I have a mover for the adjournment, please? Moved by Councilor Shankar, seconded by Councilor Ostrander. Assuming no discussion there, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. And I guess we have to log in again under the other Zoom meeting. So we'll see everybody there in a moment or two. Are we okay with proceeding straight into the meeting, or does anyone want to break?
That's fine.
I'm seeing straight into the meeting. Okay, so we'll adjourn this and we'll reconvene in a moment on the other